My name is Gregor Johann Mendel, and I was born on July 22, 1822, in what was then Heisendorf, Austria. My parents are Anton and Rosine Mendel. In 1846, aged 24, I took fruit-growing classes given by Professor Franz Divel at the Brunn Philosophical Institute. Divel was an authority on plant breeding. I became a priest in 1847 and got my own parish in 1848. I did not enjoy working as a parish priest and got a job as a high school teacher in 1849. In 1850, aged 28, I failed exams that would have qualified me as a high school teacher. A year later, I went to the University of Vienna where I studied chemistry, biology, and physics. The idea was that by strengthening my knowledge in these subjects, I would qualify as a high school teacher. After completing my studies in 1854, I returned to the monastery and became a physics teacher at a school at Brunn for the next 16 years. Around 1854, I began to research the transmission of hereditary traits in plant hybrids. At the time of my studies, it was a generally accepted fact that the hereditary traits of the offspring of any species were merely the diluted blending of whatever traits were present in the parents. The results of such studies were often seeked by the relatively short period of time during which the experiments were conducted, whereas my research continued over as many 8 years, between 1856 and 1863, and involved tens of thousands of individual plants. I chose to use peas for my experiments due to their many distinct varieties, and because offspring could be quickly and easily produced. I cross-fertilized pea plants that had clearly opposite characteristics, tall with short, smooth with wrinkled, those containing green seeds with those containing yellow seeds, etc. And after analyzing my results, reached two of my most important conclusions. The law of segregation, which established that there are dominant and recessive traits passed on randomly from parents to offspring, and provided an alternative to blending inheritance, the dominant theory of the time. And the law of independent assortment, which established that traits were passed on independently of other traits from parents to offspring. I also proposed that this heredity follow basic statistical laws. Though my experiments had been conducted with pea plants, I put forth the theory that all living things had such traits. I was trying to discover a generally applicable law of the formation and development of hybrids. I discovered that hereditary traits are determined by cellular elements, now called genes, that exist in pairs, undergo segregation and independent assortment, and proceed unchanged through successive generations of hereditary transmissions. I was unhappy with how inheritance of traits was being explained, so I set myself the very ambitious task of discovering the laws of heredity. To achieve this, I embarked on a mammoth-sized, highly systematic 8-year study of edible peas, individually and carefully recording the traits shown by every plant in successive generations. I finally was glad to contribute to genetics with my contribution of how traits work. My conclusions were largely ignored by the vast majority, although they were not completely unknown to biologists of the time. They were not seen as generally applicable, even by myself. I thought they only applied to certain categories of species or traits. Every individual organism contains 2 alleles for each trait, and that these alleles segregate during meiosis, such that each gamete contains only one of the alleles. An offspring thus receives a pair of alleles for a trait by inheriting homologous chromosomes from the parent organisms, 1 allele for each trait from each plant. Alleles for separate traits are passed independently of one another. That is, the biological section of an allele for one trait has nothing to do with selection of an allele for another trait. Recessive alleles will always be masked by dominant alleles. Therefore, a cross between an homozygous dominant and an homozygous recessive will always express the dominant phenotype, while still having an heterozygous genotype.